it's an outlier, and so we learn from those extremes, right? It's different than anything else we know.
A drone flight over the ice wall of Antarctica has left everyone in shock, capturing something so unexpected it's got the whole world talking. But this is just one example of how drone footage has been finding crazy sights all over the world. From bike graveyards to crazy natural phenomenons, here are the times unexpected things were discovered on drone footage. 1. Melting glaciers. Glaciers are incredible, massive ice formations that play a big role in the health of our planet. They're like nature's climate gauges, showing us how the Earth is changing. But here's the bad news. They're melting faster than ever. And the main reason? Global temperatures are rising, mostly because of human activities like burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, and releasing too many greenhouse gases. This warming has sped up over the last few decades, making glaciers melt quicker than they can rebuild with new snowfall. The melting process is fueled by heat from both the air above and the water below. Warmer air temperatures melt the surface of glaciers, while warmer ocean waters sneak in underneath and chip away at them from below. This two-pronged attack makes the melting happen even faster. On top of that, during warmer months, pools of water form on the glacier's surface. These pools can drill through the ice and flow to the glacier's base, where they create underwater streams. These streams mix with the warmer ocean water and speed up the melting even more. Then there's calving, which sounds like a peaceful word, but is actually dramatic. It happens when chunks of ice break off from the edge of a glacier and crash into the ocean as icebergs. This process is made worse by the melting happening on the glacier's surface and the warmer ocean currents working away at its foundation. The impacts of all this melting are huge. For one, sea levels are rising, which is bad news for coastal areas. If all the ice in Greenland alone melted, sea levels could rise by about 25 feet, flooding cities and displacing millions of people. But it's not just about rising seas. Melting glaciers also disrupt ecosystems. For example, in places like the Himalayas, millions of people rely on glacier-fed rivers for drinking water, farming, and energy. When the glaciers shrink or melt too quickly, it throws off the balance, causing water shortages or floods. And the more glaciers melt, the faster they melt. That's because glaciers are great at reflecting sunlight, because of their bright, icy surfaces. But as they shrink, they expose darker land or water underneath, which absorbs more heat instead of reflecting it. This extra heat speeds up the melting, creating a vicious cycle. Looking ahead, scientists warn that if we don't take action to slow climate change, we could lose many of the world's glaciers by the end of this century. For instance, glaciers in the eastern Himalayas could shrink by up to 60% even if we stick to low-emission targets. In Antarctica, massive glaciers like Thwaites and Pine Island are already retreating at alarming rates, and their continued melting could lead to even more dramatic sea level rises. Want to find out more about drone footages? Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like this. We've got a lot more where that came from. 2. Pripyat in snow. The Chernobyl disaster, which happened on April 26, 1986 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, stands as one of the most chilling events in history. It's remembered as the worst nuclear accident ever. The disaster began during a late-night safety test on reactor number 4. The idea was to simulate a power outage, but things went terribly wrong. A mix of flawed reactor design and mistakes by the operators caused a massive power surge. This surge led to a devastating explosion around 1:23 a.m. that blew apart the reactor core. It wasn't just an explosion, it was a release of invisible, deadly radiation into the atmosphere. The immediate aftermath was heartbreaking. 2 workers lost their lives instantly in the explosion, and within weeks, 28 brave emergency responders died from acute radiation sickness. These were firefighters, plant workers, and others who rushed in without knowing the true extent of the danger. Over the years, countless others have suffered from illnesses tied to the radiation, with thousands of cases of thyroid cancer and other diseases being linked to the fallout. It's still hard to pin down exactly how many lives this disaster has affected, but estimates suggest that thousands more could eventually lose their lives to cancer, caused by exposure to the radioactive materials released that day. The human impact didn't stop there. About 49,000 people living in the nearby city of Pripyat were told to leave, but not until 36 hours after the explosion. Imagine being told to pack up and leave your home, not knowing if you'd ever come back. Ultimately, over 115,000 people were evacuated from the surrounding areas in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Even today, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone surrounds the plant. The environmental damage was massive. Between 50 and 185 million curies of radioactive materials were released into the air. These radioactive particles spread across Europe, with fallout detected as far away as France and Italy. People in these countries were scared and unsure of what the long-term effects might be. The contamination of the land, water, and air meant that vast areas became uninhabitable. Forests and fields turned into radioactive wastelands, and many of them remain dangerous even decades later. 3. Bike graveyard. China has found itself dealing with a strange and unexpected problem: massive bike graveyards. These are enormous piles of discarded bicycles scattered across cities like Xiamen, Shenzhen, and Wuhan. What was once a booming bike-sharing industry, meant to make transportation easier and greener, has now left behind a surreal landscape of abandoned bikes. It's a stark reminder of what happens when innovation grows too fast, without proper planning. The bike-sharing craze kicked off around 2016 and took China by storm. Companies like Ofo and Mobike rolled out millions of brightly colored bikes across cities, making it super easy for people to grab a bike using a smartphone app and leave it anywhere when they were done. These dockless bikes promised convenience and flexibility, and at first, they were a huge hit. People loved the idea of skipping crowded buses and hopping on a bike to zip around the city. But the good times didn't last. Dozens of bike-sharing companies jumped into the market, flooding cities with more bikes than they could handle. Over 70 brands were competing for space, and soon, the streets were overcrowded with bicycles, many of which were left abandoned or broken. Sidewalks became cluttered, and cities struggled to keep up with the mess. To manage the chaos, authorities started impounding bikes. But with so many of them, the bikes ended up being dumped into massive piles, creating these eerie bike graveyards. In Xiamen, one of the most notorious bike graveyards holds a staggering 60,000 bikes, stacked high like some sort of bizarre metal and rubber mountain. Shenzhen has several of these graveyards too, with some hidden from public view because of how overwhelming and unseemly they are. Smaller sites there might have 40,000 to 50,000 bikes, while the largest ones contain over 200,000. Seeing these heaps of colorful bikes, once symbols of innovation, now rusting and broken, is both striking and depressing. These bike graveyards are more than just an eyesore. They represent wasted resources and failed promises. The bike-sharing idea was supposed to be a win for the environment, reducing pollution and offering a sustainable transportation option. But the reality turned out very differently. Many bikes were vandalized or abandoned, and the public started distrusting the companies. Some people believed the bikes were equipped with tracking devices, adding to their reluctance to use them. 4. Tian Jin Site. The Tian Jin blast was one of the most devastating industrial disasters in recent history, shaking northern China on August 12, 2015. It happened at the port of Tianjin in the Binhai area, a bustling urban district filled with homes and businesses. The disaster unfolded late at night, around 11:30 p.m., at a warehouse owned by Ruihai Logistics, a company licensed to store hazardous materials. What started as a fire turned into a catastrophe that claimed lives, caused massive destruction, and left a lasting scar on the area. The first explosion was already powerful enough to register as a small earthquake, but it was followed just 33 seconds later by a second, far larger blast. This second explosion, caused by the detonation of roughly 800 tons of ammonium nitrate, sent shockwaves that were felt kilometers away. The force of the blast flattened buildings, scattered debris across the port, and lit up the night sky with a fiery inferno. Tragically, 173 people lost their lives that night, including many firefighters who had rushed to the scene. Over 798 others were injured, with burns and other serious injuries adding to the heartbreak. Families were shattered, and the entire community was left reeling from the scale of the destruction. For many, the sound of those explosions and the devastation they caused will never be forgotten. Investigations later revealed that the warehouse was storing over 40 different kinds of hazardous chemicals, including sodium cyanide and calcium carbide, in unsafe conditions. The fire started in a container holding dry nitrocellulose. and things spiraled out of control from there. To make matters even worse, the firefighters actually used water to try to put out the flames, not realizing that water could react explosively with some of the chemicals. Mismanagement and a lack of safety measures turned a bad situation into a full-blown disaster. 5. Darvaza Gas Crater. The Darvaza Gas Crater, also known as the Door to Hell or Gates of Hell, is an interesting site located in Turkmenistan's Karakum Desert, about 160 miles north of the capital, Ashgabat. It's a massive fiery hole in the ground that's been burning non-stop since the 1970s, and it's become a huge attraction for tourists who are drawn to its eerie, otherworldly vibe. The story of how the crater was created is pretty interesting. Back in 1971, Soviet engineers were drilling to explore natural gas reserves when they accidentally broke through into a huge underground gas cavern. The ground around the cavern collapsed, creating the crater. To keep the dangerous gas from leaking into nearby villages, the drilling team decided to set it on fire, thinking it would burn out in a few days. But here's the kicker: the fire never stopped. It's been burning for over 50 years now, and it shows no sign of going out anytime soon. The crater is around 200 to 230 feet and about 66 to 98 feet. It's filled with flames that come from vents in the walls and floor, all fueled by the natural gas that seeps up from below. It looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, and people can't help but be drawn to its glow, especially at night. But beyond its jaw-dropping appearance, the Darvaza Gas Crater is also an important site for scientists. Researchers study how natural gas behaves in extreme conditions, like the ones at the crater, to learn more about how gas escapes from the Earth and catches fire. This has helped improve our understanding of how we produce and consume natural gas. Even more interesting is the fact that some tiny microbes have managed to live around the crater, despite the heat and toxic gases. These microorganisms offer clues about how life can exist in harsh environments, which could even be useful for biotechnology or medical research. Locals have their own stories about the crater. Over time, various myths have popped up, with some saying it was created by drunken farmers or by curious villagers who accidentally set it on fire. 6. The Great Blue Hole. The Great Blue Hole is this massive underwater sinkhole off the coast of Belize, and it's easily one of the most stunning natural wonders on Earth. Located in the Caribbean Sea, it sits near Lighthouse Reef, about 70 kilometers from Belize City. The sinkhole is over 1,000 feet wide and plunges to a depth of around 410 feet, and its nearly perfect circular shape and deep blue color make it look like a mysterious portal into another world. This sinkhole wasn't always underwater, though. Thousands of years ago, during the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower, and what is now the Great Blue Hole was actually a huge limestone cave above the water. As the ice began to melt and sea levels rose, the cave got flooded, and eventually its roof collapsed, creating the huge sinkhole that we see today. It's amazing to think about how this dramatic change happened over thousands of years, turning the area into the breathtaking sight it is now. What really sets the Great Blue Hole apart from other natural wonders is what lies beneath the surface. The sinkhole is home to some pretty incredible features, like ancient stalactites and stalagmites that formed when the area was still a dry cave. Divers who are lucky enough to explore the depths of the Blue Hole can see these stunning rock formations up close, along with the crystal clear water that surrounds them. The walls of the hole drop straight down, creating an almost otherworldly landscape that makes it feel like you're in a completely different world. While it's not full of colorful fish like a typical coral reef, the Great Blue Hole is still home to some impressive marine life. Divers might spot Caribbean reef sharks and even hammerhead sharks swimming in the deep waters. 7. The Blood Falls of Antarctica. Located at the edge of Taylor Glacier in East Antarctica's McMurdo Dry Valleys, Blood Falls is a waterfall that pours bright red water from the ice, creating a striking contrast against the snowy white surroundings. The site is as eerie as it is beautiful, and it's been capturing the attention of scientists and explorers since it was first discovered back in 1911. The falls were first spotted by Australian geologist Thomas Griffith Taylor during the British Antarctic expedition. At first, Taylor thought the red color came from algae, which seemed like a plausible explanation at the time. But after more research, scientists learned that the color actually comes from iron in the water, which oxidizes when it touches the air, kind of like when iron rusts. Blood Falls is pretty special. because the water comes from an underground reservoir buried about 1,300 feet beneath the glacier. This reservoir is actually filled with super salty water, or brine, that's been trapped down there for millions of years. Scientists believe that when sea levels were higher in the past, the area was flooded, forming fjords. As glaciers advanced, they sealed the seawater beneath them, creating this unique salty reservoir that stays liquid thanks to its high salt concentration and heat from below. The most striking part about blood falls is the color. When the water first seeps out, it's clear, but as soon as it hits the air, it turns a deep crimson red because of the iron in it. It's like watching rust form in real time, which makes the whole thing look even more mysterious and out of place in such a harsh, icy environment. What's even more mind-blowing is that scientists have discovered tiny microorganisms living in the brine. These microbes survive in the extreme conditions under the glacier: no light, no oxygen, and very little food. This is huge for research because it shows that life can survive in environments we thought were too harsh. It's even led to new questions about whether life could exist on planets with similar conditions, like Mars. One of the most interesting things about blood falls is that it doesn't flow all the time. The water comes out in bursts, and scientists are still figuring out why it doesn't flow steadily. 8. Crop circles. Crop circles are those elaborate patterns that appear in fields, typically made by flattening crops like wheat, barley, and canola. Some crop circles are simple, just a circle or two, while others are incredibly detailed, featuring complex geometric shapes. They're most commonly found in southern England, though reports of these formations have popped up all over the world. In the late 1970s, crop circles started making waves in places like Wiltshire and Oxfordshire. These early formations were pretty simple, but over time, they grew more complex, catching the public's eye and sparking even more media attention. When it comes to why crop circles appear, there are a ton of theories. A lot of people have suggested that aliens are behind it, maybe leaving messages for us in the form of these intricate designs. The idea got a boost when people noticed how some crop circles were so perfectly made that they seemed impossible for humans to replicate. But the evidence for extraterrestrial involvement is mostly speculative, and no real scientific proof has backed this up. On the other hand, there's the more grounded theory that crop circles are mostly created by humans. In 1991, two men, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, came forward to admit that they had created over 200 crop circles using basic tools like ropes and wooden planks. Their goal wasn't to create anything mysterious, but rather to play a prank and get people wondering about UFOs. Since then, there have been plenty of copycat hoaxes, with people trying to recreate those impressive designs. Of course, there are also some theories suggesting that natural phenomena could be responsible. Some have speculated that things like wind patterns or even electrical discharges could cause crop formations. For example, rotating air columns might flatten crops in such a way that the plants look like they've been carefully arranged, even though nature is to blame. What really draws people in about crop circles, aside from the mystery, is the sheer variety and complexity of the designs. They can range from simple shapes to elaborate patterns that stretch across hundreds of feet. Many of them show a kind of geometric precision that amazes both amateurs and scientists alike. And while crop circles are most common in England, they've been reported in over 50 countries around the world, adding to the intrigue. Some scientists have even gotten involved, studying crop circles from a more investigative angle. A few researchers have noticed that crops inside certain crop circles seem to grow faster than those outside, which raises questions about the environmental conditions or even radiation levels around these formations. 9. The Devil's Pool. Devil's Pool is a natural rock pool that sits right on the edge of Victoria Falls, one of the most iconic and massive waterfalls in the world. Located on the Zambian side of the falls, close to Livingstone Island, the pool offers a truly thrilling experience for anyone brave enough to swim right up to the edge of the waterfall. It's often called an infinity pool because it feels like you're floating at the edge of the world. The pool itself is about 10 feet deep and is separated from the powerful flow of the Zambezi River by a narrow rock lip, creating a barrier that keeps swimmers safe from being swept over the falls. It's an incredible spot for taking in the views, with the sheer drop of the waterfall just beyond you, but it's not for the faint of heart. Getting to Devil's Pool isn't as simple as just walking up to it. You'll need to hop on a guided boat tour from Livingstone Island. Once you're on the island, you'll swim a short distance to the pool itself, and there are guides to help out along the way, especially if you're not the most confident swimmer. It's a pretty fun and unique way to get up close to the falls. While the experience can be safe if you follow the guide's instructions, it's important to note that this activity is only available during certain times of the year. The best time to visit is during the low water season, which runs from mid-August to December. This is when the water levels are low enough to safely access the pool. However, during the high water months, the pool is off limits due to safety risks. Basically, the falls are just too powerful to get anywhere near. If you're planning a visit, the months of October and November are often the best time to go, as the water levels are the lowest and the pool is easiest to access. While no fatalities have been reported during organized tours, there are still a few things to be cautious about. The rocks around the pool can get slippery, so it's easy to lose your footing if you're not careful. And while there are hippos and crocodiles in the Zambezi River upstream, they generally steer clear of the falls area, so you don't need to worry about running into them at the pool itself. 10. The Spotted Lake. Spotted Lake, located in British Columbia's Simicameen Valley near Osoyoos, is a pretty amazing natural site that stands out for its unique look, especially in the summer. As the weather gets hotter, the water in the lake starts to evaporate, and what's left behind are colorful mineral deposits that create a striking spotted effect on the lake bed. The result is a beautiful, otherworldly landscape that has become one of Canada's most visually captivating spots. What makes the lake even more interesting is its mineral makeup. It's filled with minerals like magnesium sulfate, calcium sulfate, and sodium sulfate, which are what give the spots their vibrant colors when the water level drops. Since Spotted Lake has no outlet, it doesn't get water from rivers, only from runoff from nearby hills and melting snow. Over time, as the water flows in but doesn't flow out, salts build up, giving the lake its high mineral concentration and those colorful patches. Spotted Lake is also rich in history and culture. For generations, the Sialex Okanagan people have considered it a sacred place. They believe the lake has healing properties, and the minerals have been used for therapeutic purposes. During World War I, the minerals from the lake were even harvested to make ammunition, which is a pretty surprising historical tidbit. In 2001, the Okanagan Nation Alliance worked to acquire the lake and the surrounding land to protect both its cultural significance and its unique natural features. The area around Spotted Lake is also home to a variety of wildlife. The Okanagan Valley, where the lake is located, is teeming with animals, from bears and cougars to moose and hundreds of bird species. However, this area has faced threats from human activities like mining, poaching, and development, which have harmed the local habitat. To combat these issues, efforts have been made to protect the area and preserve its ecosystem. And do you think there are other interesting places that don't have any drone footage yet? Maybe this is only a peek of all the crazy stuff drones can capture.